I want to talk about Rebel Moon, and to be fully transparent with everybody here. I've only seen the director's cut of part 1 so far. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yes. I got my kids running around the house. It's been a busy weekend. It was my dad's birthday today. I haven't really had the opportunity to consume as much media as I probably should have before this podcast, but I want to talk about part 1. And okay.
So let's go into part 1 right now. Hold on. Let's go into. Okay. So for people,
I don't want to go too long, guys. I got about another 15 or 20 minutes, and I got to roll out. So
perfect.
Yep.
All right.
Okay. All right. So if you haven't, we're talking spoilers now, Rebel Moon. So if you haven't seen the director's cut, part 1, check out and replay crew later. All right. So you've been warned. All right. Yeah. Go, guys.
All right. So one of the things I noticed is that I had a real hard time connecting to this movie. Like, okay. So I want to be clear. I am a Zack Snyder fan, yes, okay? But it was his DC stuff that really turned me on to Zack Snyder and his work, okay? The reason why I love Justice League and I love Zack Snyder's Justice League so much is because I have a 35-year history of my entire life of knowing those characters, okay? And being connected to those characters and reading those characters in the comics and TV shows and video games. So there is a long history there. All right. So it enables me to fall in love with those characters and fall in love with what I'm seeing on the screen quite easily. With Rebel Moon, it's harder for me to have that same connection because it is a new IP and I don't have an entire life history connected to these characters. Okay. So what I found is that, in my opinion, pacing wise, I actually preferred the original PG-13 cut over the director's cut, because for me, I found that I probably wouldn't be saying this had they have released the director's cut first and had I have seen this version first, but because I had seen the PG-13 version first, I kind of already, like anybody else could say, I knew the journey. I just knew that getting there was going to be a little bit different, right? But because I've already seen the journey, I found it harder for me to stay, what's the word I'm looking for? Just to stay like really focused in on the movie, because it's like, man, I've seen this movie, even though I haven't, even like the entire intro was, I remember like the intro scene, that whole intro was completely different, where he's playing with the guy's brains and talking about, oh, this was his memory of this. And this, like, that was fucking intense and disgusting to see and insane. And like even the sex scene at the very beginning, how they really establish, the main character's relationship with that other guy before she really starts to see Gunner in that way. But like that whole dynamic, that wasn't kind of like, I can understand why Netflix wanted that taken out, why Netflix didn't want that to be a part of what the audiences first originally saw. I get it from their perspective, but like I said, for me, I just found the pacing of the first, especially like, again, a dad, busy, got very limited time. For me, the pacing of the first movie was a lot easier for me to go along with and enjoy. Again, because I saw the director's cut after seeing the first movie, I just wasn't as pulled in as I was for that first viewing. You know what I mean? So I don't blame Zach for that. Obviously I think that was a Netflix's decision to do that, but because I saw the movie the way I did, I just, like I said, I found it harder for me to get into it because I already knew where this was going. Yeah, what they added in was fucking hardcore. It was crazy. Like I said, during that sex scene, I'm with my wife, and we're watching the movie while we're laying in bed, and she even looks over at me and she's like, "Holy shit!" Like wow. Like she's like, "That's
right." And that's what I'm saying, right? In terms of like being at the different movie, or it was a completely different movie, or it was somewhat of a completely different movie, because we saw Noble dive into the cave just like he did. We saw him slaughter all those people in the caves just like we did. They just added a little, they had him a little bit longer, gave him a gun, but other than that, we saw that in the PG-13 cut. We just didn't see it without the gore.
And I'll be honest, some of the gore actually even took me out of it a little bit. So, for example, the Bennu scene where we're watching Tarek and he has to tame the Bennu.
Right.
Okay?
And he stabbed him with
at the very end, the Bennu just fucking, like, he destroyed him, and there's blood coming out of his mouth. And then the very next thing it cuts to is the entire crew, and they're all smiling and happy, and they're optimistic about the journey, and it's just like it doesn't fit. We just watched a guy get slaughtered on screen, and then it cuts to the optimistic team.
There should have been a dialogue change, something that invoked
that, right?
that reference,
because
like, oh my god,
day,
what?
Because at the end of the day, it's like they didn't even establish that was Ray Porter's character, right? They didn't really even establish him as like a bad guy. You know what I mean? We just knew that Tarek owed some kind of a debt, and that's why he had him, right? But there was no real reason for the audience to necessarily hate this character or want to see him get torn apart. But that effect wasn't as powerful in the original cut because, again, you don't see the blood and the guts and the gore. You know, it's kind of left for the audience to use their own imagination and figure it out. So when you're transitioning to that scene, you know, you can kind of get a pass with that. But after the audience just sees that, and then the next transition is everybody smiling and getting on a ship, it's like, it threw me off. I'm not going to lie. I'm trying to be objective here. It did throw me off a little bit. There was another thing I noticed that threw me off as well is when, Sindri, after Sindri gets his fucking head caved in and his body is laying there, okay, there's actually a part where you can see Gunnar go over, and I guess in the original cut it would make more sense, but you could see him put his hand and try to like cradle his head, and in the director's cut it looks like he's trying to cradle a head that's not there. So again, just there were little things that I picked up on that kind of threw me off. Maybe that's just me being overly critical, but from my perspective, for me, pacing wise, I thought the first movie did it for me. Had I have seen this movie first, maybe I would have had a different opinion. But because I've already seen the main story, it was harder for me to get into it. I'm sure people are going to kill me for saying that, but that's my opinion.
No. That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about, brother. No, everybody's not going to have the same opinion. If you look at the comments, everybody's saying the same thing. Aaron Fisher's reviews, he made that point that you just made. I watched his reviews earlier. He said, honestly, the director's cut were great. But for some reason, that streamlined way that the PG version was shot was perfect. He said he really, really enjoyed the way that was shot. And he has the same opinion like you do. If he was going to just come out with a director's cut, just come out with the director's cuts and let that be that.
Well,
but
Charles, just to play devil's advocate here also, this was an experiment for Netflix.
That's true.
Because now they rolled out, okay, we got the PG-13 version out, we got the numbers. Now we're going to get the director's cut. We're going to get those numbers within the next 28 days. We're going to see if it makes sense to keep this formula or just go straight to the director's cut. But either way how they go, it's still a budget that you got for movies. So it's still a win. You know? Yeah. Also, I want to a shout out to Curly Ray, aka Jimmy. He has a theory here that I wanted to share with you guys also, and you guys tell me if you agree with him or not. So I have theories for Rebel Moon I want to share after watching Rebel Moon, the director's cut. Where's the other one? Here it is. I think Princess Issa might be a supernatural being and might do with a connection to Twilight of the Gods. That is an interesting theory. What do you guys think?
I don't know. I mean,
even with the paintings of Issa,
right. I know he's referring to a young Cora when she was basically staring at the painting, and saying. So I don't know enough about or have a connection to Twilight of the Gods to make that connection yet. You know what I mean? So, I mean, I really can't. I mean, honestly, I really can't say. So, yeah. Zod, what do you think?
Zod.
I mean, it could be. I mean, I think that Zach is trying to build a cohesive Snyderverse on Netflix with there's all kinds of theories, connecting, even connecting Army of the Dead to Rebel Moon and all this, that it's all connected and it all, has a part to play in the story. So I mean, I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Mm-hmm. Sort of like Stephen King, like how his books all connect to basically, yeah.
No, dude, personally, like I watched this yesterday. I freaking loved it. And this is the thing also that this is not a spoiler because this was already shown on Cartoon Discovery. Remember, guys, when they're pulling the ship out of the with the ropes?
Yeah.
Okay. And I saw so many Twitter X a-holes saying, "Oh, but why are they just pulling? And the ship should be working. This, blah, 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 blah." Well, now we know why the ship wasn't working, and now it is. So this is what pisses me off, also. But again, Charles, you said it earlier. Twitter X can stupid people on the platform, and
that's just the way it is. There's a different animal. There's a different era for the way people experience cinema now. They just it's completely different than when I was growing up, when I was experiencing it. So yeah, they look for different things there. But I want to give my opinion right quick on the director's cut. So I liked him. I mean, I'm not going to give them a full 5. I'll give them like a 4 out of 5, and I'll start with the stuff that I really didn't care for first. So the gratuitous sex scene in the first one, basically that didn't fit. And the reason it didn't fit for me is because it later on is obviously established who she was, who the main character was in love with and who she was going to fall in love with. Now that conversation that she was having with the old man about, basically he was saying, give him a chance. They'd accept you more if you were married to him and all this other kind of stuff.
Give him a child and everything. Yeah,
right. And she was like, well, that's not, basically she was saying that's not the type of relationship that we have. We're good the way we are. So in essence, they were basically saying that she just sees this dude and it's just casual or whatever. So them showing that though had nothing to do with the film. It didn't drive the plot forward at all, in my opinion.
Charles, can I ask you, was the dialogue different in that scene between the director's cut and the original cut? The dialogue was different. Okay.
The dialogue was different. Yes. So I didn't really like that because it didn't serve the purpose. Now, in part 2, between her and Gunner, yeah, that makes sense because that served the purpose of the actual plot. He ends up dying and she ends up falling in love with a man and she loses him again, just like she did in War. So that made sense.
I think that was the reason for why we got that, though, is like a juxtaposition to show you the difference, like to say, okay, this is the kind of relationship she has with him, where it's just a friends with benefits. It's just completely based on lust and just fulfilling needs, whereas the relationship with Gunner is based on love and mutual affection and passion and all of that. So I think the idea there was to give you a differential between the two. So me personally, I didn't have a problem with that because I thought that it really did establish the difference between here. These two are just having sex. These two are making love. These two
actually, I can see where you're going with it now. Actually, you know what? And when you think about it, when you think about it, I see where you're going with that, because if you think about where Cora comes from, the whole time she was there, she was speaking about you guys are gonna lose. She wasn't attaching herself to anything, including him. So I can see where you're going with that. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
See, but in the end, they both characters, Gunner and Hunter, I think that was his name, or no, he was a hunter. That wasn't his real name. They established that he was the hunter of the tribe, but they both died a noble death. You know what I mean? They both died going out fighting. So it to me, when I saw that, it did highlight the similarities between the two characters, and it was like the battle that she was having in her own head, figuring out who she wanted to be with. You know what I mean?
Well, and plus he was the hunter. He was more of like the, you know, he can basically, let's just put it this way, he was the alpha male. He's the guy that could go into the village and pretty much have his pick of any woman that he wanted, right? And Korra knew that, and so it's sort of their dynamic, and their dynamic was purely physical, was purely animalistic.
Did anybody else think,
like, even in the novel, they kind of go into a little more about that. I'm sorry, I just wanted to finish that point.
No worries.
The novel pretty much, you know, talks about that, about how, he's pretty much the guy. Like, he'd be like the choice male for the majority of the women in the village.
Did anybody else think that he kind of looked like a great value version of Hugh Jackman?
Yeah, he does. I've always thought that. He looks like if you guys pay attention, he was in Army of Thieves. Just take away his beard and all of that stuff.
Yes.
He was in Army of Thieves.
Oh,
That was him.
that
was the first thing that I thought. I was like, he looks kind of like Hugh Jackman. Who is this guy? Is this his little brother or something? But yeah, that he looks exactly, kind of like him. Yeah, absolutely. So so what I did like, so the extended visuals, obviously the extended backstories, especially with Korra's backstory. Oh my god. So and Aerys, for that matter, I didn't think that they would give him that much backstory, but they did a really good job with his character. That was awesome.
But and that's something that Zach always does. He gives every single character his 15 minutes of fame, and then boom. So
and he did.
Even Jimmy had a lot more backstory in this one, which I really thought they could have used that in the original cut. I don't know why they cut out so much.
Jimmy got a lot of backstory in part 1, but Jimmy really got to shine in part 2. I mean, he really got some great character moments that you just do not have in the PG-13 cuts.
Yeah. So all in all, like I said, I like the backstories. They extended those backstories, especially with the plot and the plight, I should say, of the royal family. I was really, really interested in diving more into that and what actually happened, and that scene between Belisarius and the king, because he knew Belisarius was like wilding out. And he was like, look, you need to stop this crap. So he had him kiss the ring, and then that was that. And then from that point on, after Belisarius gave his speech, did you see the look on the king's face? Did you guys pay attention to that in part 2?
He knew. So let's move to part 2 now then, because I think that's part of part 2. So